Never again, never again, never again. After the Holocaust, it became common to declare these words, never again, but the more I hear this lofty phrase, the more I want to ask, never again, what? The first use of never again most likely came in a 1961 Swedish documentary, Blood Time, in which the narrator stated, "It must never happen again, never again." Briefly, as popularized by a militant rabbi named Meir Kahan, the term gained a more aggressive connotation in the late 1960s, referring to the right of Jews or Israel to defense. Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin's wife, Aliza, used the term in this way in a 1977 interview. As she pounded a table, she declared, "Never again will we be without the means to defend ourselves." By the late 1970s, however, the term soon gained a broader conception as a vow to learn from the past and a commitment to prevent genocide. In 1979, when President Carter's Commission on the Holocaust recommended founding the museum, which would soon become the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, President Carter stated, "Never again will the world look the other way or fail to act in time to prevent the terrible crime of genocide." Awarding Elie Wiesel, author of Night and many other books, the Congressional Gold Medal in 1985, President Reagan observed, "The survivors swore their oath never again. The American people also made that pledge never again, and we've kept it." Since the 1980s, these words, never again, have become popular and proliferated as a constant refrain in curriculum design and commemoration of the Holocaust. So, this pledge, never again, has gained an almost talismanic quality as something unquestionably uncontroversial and good, capable of uniting rivals. The case of Presidents Carter and Reagan is instructive. However, basic questions have gone unanswered, such as never again, what or how. The simplest answer will not do. The Holocaust will not occur again. Even a renewed tragedy afflicting Jews would not be another Holocaust. Never again then must mean something more. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, an institution extremely closely linked to the pledge, explains never again as a promise to past and future to do everything we can to ensure that the horrors of genocide are not repeated. Like almost anyone who's thought about the Holocaust at all, I certainly agree, but this goal of avoiding the horrors of genocide provides only minimal guidance. A first problem with understanding never again stems from the very concept of genocide itself. Genocide is most often identified after it has happened. So, if we are looking to never again to prevent genocide, we run the risk of looking to the past to make a promise to the future to stop something after it has happened. This is not possible. You cannot prevent the recurrence of disaster by focusing on outcomes. Before the final outcome of the Holocaust, many overlooked or failed to grasp the significance of a long chain of actions and utterances ranging from Nazi anti-Semitic pronouncements to violence against Jews, to the creation of ghettos, and finally to reports of killing. There was no lack of information about the potential for harm, but for many near and far, these news items simply did not seem central enough. The cause of disaster lay not then in the outcome itself, but in the way humans processed or failed to respond to information. The shock, and indeed the dismay, conveyed by the words never again further suggests that we are not learning the full lessons of the term if we think never again should apply only to genocide. After the Holocaust, it didn't make sense to ask, how could we have allowed this to happen? How could we not have done more at an earlier stage? Granted, some bad things are beyond human control, but the Holocaust resulted from a combination of human action and inaction. Through our action and inaction, we have learned we are capable of causing terrible destruction. So, if never again merely becomes something we say after the fact, after we have caused yet another disaster, it's pointless, frankly, banal. Indeed, the more we restrict never again to genocide, the more we are simply waiting to say never again in the future about something else we have done or left undone. We would do well to heed the advice of the philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah, who asked, "What will future generations condemn us for?" To bring this question closer to never again, are they likely to condemn us for causing old or new forms of destruction? Never again cannot mean only never again the Holocaust, or even never again genocide, if we want to avoid a future full of never agains. Like individuals, groups of humans will always make mistakes, but the stakes of never again have never been as high because of our unprecedented capacity to create and destroy. There's a strange parallel to the early prehistory of our species, Homo sapiens. At that time, the failure to learn could be catastrophic because of the very small human population and the grave threats affecting small human bands. Today, our sheer numbers and technical prowess lull us into a false sense of security at a time when we've once again gained the capacity to make multiple potentially catastrophic mistakes. Under those circumstances, extending never again beyond genocide is critical to our collective future. Making never again a meaningful principle for action in a post-Holocaust world would entail something broader and more radical than a commitment to stop genocide. Now, never again must continue to demand of us that we seek to prevent genocide, but it must also change the way we process information, the way we conceive of national sacrifice, and finally, the way we single out genocide as a topic of the pledge. Next to what? The other unanswered question posed by never again is how, or rather how to curb a future full of never agains. Relying on experts, education, and technology all sound like plausible answers, but none is sufficient in its own right. Well-intentioned, highly qualified experts often advise monitoring the world for extremist regimes committed to hatred and violence. They're right. It does make sense to look for such extremism. But the more we focus on extremism, the more we overlook one of the key lessons of Holocaust research: the ordinary elements of genocide. Words we use to try to describe the Holocaust, words like unimaginable, unspeakable, horrific, cause us to think of genocide as anomalous, distinct from human experience. But the key lessons of never again lie in a strange combination of the extraordinary and ordinary. To be specific, perpetrators, those who killed not just for extreme reasons, hatred, racism, anti-Semitism, but also for the very most ordinary of motives, peer pressure, or because everyone else was doing it. Ordinary behavior also shaped bystanders who failed to act on what they had reason to know. Taking never again seriously, then, would require us not just to imagine the unimaginable, but also to understand how ordinary and, from the individual's perspective, entirely rational behavior contributes to disastrous outcomes. We also need to realize that education, technology, and media, as currently organized, are not just solutions, but also obstacles. Let's consider the following notions: individualized content, customer service, student-centered learning. All are widely praised and touted. All privilege the individual's interests. None is likely to advance the goals of never again. Let's start first with student-centered learning. Now, this can lead to important methods and strategies, but when it comes to education, never again usually requires telling students about matters far removed from their daily experiences and interests. Never again, frankly, is usually not relevant on a daily basis, and never again also requires telling students and challenging them in many cases to consult sources of information that some are in the habit of overlooking. As for technology, never again challenges the dominant approach of customizing content to match the individual's interests. Imagine I, for example, set up a set of information feeds and streams designed to cater to my interests, say, for example, cross-country skiing, new wave music, labradoodles. Now, how would Never Again fit into that mix, or into whatever comparable mix of information feeds and streams you may have set up on your own personal electronic devices? Most of the time, Never Again is not news you can use. How many of us would privilege an information stream that focused on far-off crises affecting people we didn't know in distant lands? Is there an app for that? If there were, would you pay attention to it on your smartphone or tablet if you grew bored during my talk? The business model for media desperate for revenue further threatens to block the flow of information. Most Never Again reporting would fall into the area of public service, highly unlikely to attract readers, viewers, eyeballs, clicks, advertising, and most importantly, revenue. Given this lack of revenue, it makes sense for media to assign resources and staff elsewhere. Compare, for example, the number of reporters, on-air personalities, off-screen personalities, sideline personalities, and the like assigned to cover any major American professional sports team. So here it could be the Red Sox or Patriots, for example, but in other regions it would be others, with those on the ground or even likely to write about the Central African Republic, to name just one country recently afflicted by mass killing. With the web and our personal devices, we could in principle learn quickly about any crisis anywhere, but in reality, the business model for media threatens to erase any such advantage. Suppose we did pay attention to matters far removed from our individualized information streams. In such case, Never Again would challenge us to act. Now, imagine I told you that a government somewhere that most of us don't know, in a country that most of us are not paying attention to, is massacring its citizens or a group. Or imagine I said that a group unaffiliated with the government was carrying on the killing. So, a group we don't know, in a country most of us are not paying attention to, is killing people we don't know. And that does sound a lot like Rwanda before Rwanda. And what did we do in that case? Let's add to the scenario. Imagine I told you that survivors of massacres posted videos to YouTube showing details of slaughter or recorded other eyewitness testimony. Would that propel you to support action? I can already hear objections. It's too dangerous, too distant, too uncertain. We did not try to act similar slaughter elsewhere, so why should we do so now? It would be inconsistent. We do not know these people or understand their differences. We cannot be the world's policemen or ask our men and women in the armed services to accept such deadly risks for such uncertain ends. That last point is vital, to recognize the real and often deadly perils confronted by men and women who have sworn to uphold the national service. But why should service to the nation be the supreme cause of loyalty and sacrifice? If Never Again is to serve as more than a slogan, it must challenge our concept of state sovereignty and of a world where service to the nation is the supreme good and cause of loyalty. Or, imagine I told you of another kind of disaster, one that also threatened incredible destruction, if not necessarily the same kind as genocide. Would you support action? Would you do so if it carried some immediate upfront costs, say, higher price of some basic commodity? The initial impetus for Never Again stemmed from memory of the Holocaust and other past genocides. But without forgetting such past tragedies, we must move Never Again beyond memory to the present and future. Instead of looking only at extremist, hateful regimes, tyrants, terrorists, malefactors, evildoers, we also need to recognize how ordinary people living ordinary lives, pursuing ordinary goals for ordinary reasons, can also contribute to disastrous and tragic outcomes. Instead of looking just at others, we should look at ourselves as well and at how we process and respond to information. We need to be aware of, and at times fight, the dominant strategy of media technology, and, yes, education of the early 21st century, in which customization of content makes us not just more informed, but also more ignorant, and dangerously so. Never again means really trying to learn. There is no single panacea that assures a future without ills, but a true pursuit of never again will at least allow us to identify the gravest threats of our own causing, identify them and address them, rather than simply reacting to the future and afterwards saying, never again. Thank you very much.